Ever since I first read Bram Stoker's Dracula, vampires have fascinated me. It didn't help that I was a 90s kid, which meant that I grew up watching Blade, half human, half vampire, utter badass. Underworld, that Celine leaping down scene, which was our first introduction to our character scene. That scene, chef's kiss, perfection, no notes. Kate Beckinsale held me in a grip. Aaliyah as Queen Akasha in Queen of the Damned. God, R.I.P. baby girl, but also younger Noria, child Noria was stunned, just in awe. Then there was the Dracula's Brides and the Van Helsing movie. All of this to say that vampires have fascinated me since I was a child, long before Edwin Cullen showed up with his pale and sparkling in the sunlight ass. And with a love for vampire came a fascination for their lore, which in turn was followed by a vested interest in watching anything vampire related or adjacent. Interview with a Vampire is goated, by the way. Just saying. Just putting it out there. Claudia will always be baby girl for me. But as I was saying, I have a deep love for vampires and what they stand for. We've always, as a people, focused on their excesses, their hedonistic lifestyle. That is what we get when we have creatures who can live forever, who've turned their beauty into a weapon that is used to lure in their prey, and who get to mesmerize and take whatever it is that they want, that they desire, whenever they want it. But I do think that there's another aspect of vampirism that we often ignore because other media have often blinded us to the overindulgence of the vampire persona. And that is the fact that to live forever is a pretty lonely thing. Vampires are lonely, and Sinners as a film holds that up in very stark relief. Now, it is important for me to state that there will be spoilers. So if you still haven't seen the movie and don't want to be spoiled, now's the time to log off from this video, especially because as at yesterday, Sinners is available to rent or outright purchase on Prime Video. So if you've never got the chance to see it in cinema and would like to watch it at home, you can do so right this moment. Without warning and heads up effectively given, let's move on to the video proper, starting with what birthed this video in the first place. So, I was scrolling along on Twitter as I tend to do when I'm bored when I saw this tweet pop up on my TL. The original tweet was a gif of Mary screaming after Smoke stabs Annie in the chest, killing her before she can turn into a vampire, as Annie had urged Smoke to do should the worst happen. Mary screams at seeing Annie die and is dragged away by Stark. Now, someone quoted that tweet with her, she didn't play with Annie, which I 100% agree with. If you watch the film and notice the dynamics of Mary's relationship with Annie, you would see that theirs was a close friendship and bond that was separate from Mary's relationship with Stark and Annie's relationship with Smoke. Like, Annie tells Remick when he tries to imply that Mary is as much an outsider at the juke joint as he is, Mary is family. That blanket statement implied that Mary is someone that is there to all of them, not just Stark. And I find myself having to say that because the amount of bad faith arguments and think pieces where people get so much wrong about the character of Mary is driving me to the wall. But anyway, back to the tweet. Someone replies to the she didn't play about Annie tweet with a nah, she didn't play about Stark, implying that the reason why Mary was so upset was because she knew that with Annie dead, Smoke wouldn't want to join them in becoming vampires, and thus Stark wouldn't have his brother, which would render him unhappy. And as much as I agree with some of what that person replied with, I do have a problem with the central conceit of their tweet that makes it seem that the only reason why Mary was devastated about Annie being killed before she could turn was because of what that meant for Stark, because no. Mary was devastated that Annie wouldn't be joining them in eternity as vampires because ultimately, vampirism at its core is lonely, and Sinners showed this clearly with all the vampires we're introduced to within the film. What is at the core of Remick being so desirous to turn Sammy? It's because of Sammy's ability to make music that reaches across time and space. Like he tells Sammy, the one thing that Remick wants so desperately is to be transported to an earlier time when those he knew, those long dead and places long turned to ash, still exist. The reason why he unleashed a night of terror on those who were present at Smoke and Stack's juke joint for a good old time is because Remick at his core is someone that has walked this earth for so long that he's starting to forget those he knew, those who mattered to him, and is thus desirous of that connection again and believes that with Sammy's help and music, he can get all of that. He turned everyone with the hope of eventually getting to Sammy so that he can use that magic of his in order to finally soothe his own lonely soul. And this is something that drives the hive mind that all the vampires fall into, because being of one mind means that, sure, like Mary says, after they kill you, you get to rise again as a vampire and you can all be together forever. But it is that desire to be together forever that speaks to just how lonely eternity can feel. Maybe the first couple of years or decades or centuries might be fun, but what happens afterwards? What happens after the first millennia? The second one? The third one? The 10th? At what point does your memory fracture? At what point does it drive you to madness? That loneliness. I personally think that that's the reason why these films and these movies and books that have vampires in them always have them surrounded. They either find a community of other vampires to surround themselves with, or they find love and try to turn that love so that they don't feel lonely anymore. It is what drives the relationship between Lestat and Louis, why it turned him. It's why the Michelsons always come back to each other, because the thing about being an original is that you've lived longer than others, including other vampires. The good thing about being the most durable first vampire family is that there's a bigger chance that your family would all survive till the end, which means that you wouldn't be as lonely as you'd feared compared to others. I mean, loneliness is one of the core themes for Klaus, and this is why he's so drawn to Caroline, why he puts his all into hope and is willing to fight and then die for her. It's why the Cullens are always together, even when they are partnered up. They are still together as one family. And it is why Victoria is absolutely distraught when James is killed and is driven to create more vampires to try and soothe that pain. Of course, she eventually turns them into a vampire army, but that's a conversation for another day. Human beings are social creatures. It is in our nature to seek and desire companionship. For some people, they need a ton of people. For others, one or two would suffice. But needing others is necessary, and the thought of spending forever alone with no one beside you is enough to almost drive you to the brink of madness. Sinners has this as the driving force behind the vampire's actions. Bo's desperation to get his wife to come out is because he doesn't want to consider eternity without grace. And he doesn't mind using their daughter to get her to comply, of course. If he had successfully turned Grace, you can bet that they would have gone after Lisa next, to turn her so that they can remain a family forever. Stark's almost desperation to turn Smoke is also driven by the fact that he cannot envision life, or rather an undead existence, without his brother. They've been twins all their life, which means that since he could draw breath, his brother has been with him. Sinners shows Stark's desperation, that desire to have Smoke join him as an undead, and every act of Smoke rejecting vampirism is to Stark Smoke rejecting him and the life they could have had together. Now, I'm sure there are those who are of the opinion that it shouldn't be a big deal for Stark since Mary turned him, which, to be fair, Mary turned Stark because he's the first person she absolutely cannot imagine spending eternity without. The way I see the vampireism parasite in Sinners, it seems more like new vampires often choose their first victim to turn to be someone they absolutely cannot do without. Someone they absolutely cannot do life or be an undead without. For Mary, that person was Stark. For Bo, that person was Grace. And for Stark, that person would ideally be Smoke. Smoke, however, has no interest in becoming a vampire. Like Annie tells him, that is just condemning your soul to wander the earth endlessly. And like she has Smoke promise her, she would rather die and have her soul move on to be reunited with their child. And so Smoke keeps that promise to her, piercing her heart before she's condemned to a lifetime of loneliness. And that is the sight that sets Mary off. Because as much as Stark was her first choice, Annie also factors into that because Annie is family. Because there's a very high possibility that just as Mary grew up around Smoke and Stack, she probably did grow up around Annie too. They've known each other for too long for that not to be the case. It is implied. And so Mary is desperate for Annie to be turned so all four of them can be together. After all, two's a company, three's a crowd, but four is just right. Her scream was for Annie not being with them, was for Smoke deciding that he would rather Annie stay dead than spend forever with the rest of them. And that is what she's reacting to. And the film does stick with its central conceit of the loneliness of vampires, because even with the post-credit scene, after all the years have passed and Stack was able to keep his promise to Smoke to not turn Sammy and let Sammy go, Stack shows up once again before Sammy. The years have passed. Stack and Mary are still young, still beautiful, still the hunters luring in their prey, still lonely. And Stack makes the offer to turn Sammy, who is now old and grey and will be passing on in any moment. He tells Sammy about how he misses the sun and his brother and asks him if he wants to be turned, an offer that Sammy turns down. I think it's important to call that out, to realize that over 70 years have passed since that night, and Stack is still hoping that he will be able to get another person from his family to join him. Like, sure, he's had Mary, but he gets lonely after so long, and what he wants is someone else to join them on that long journey, to live that long life with them, and yet Sammy turns him down. It is pretty heartbreaking when you consider it, when you really think about it. That as much as the post-credit scene has Stack all glammed up, looking like he's been having the absolute best time of his life for the past decades, he still can't get over the fact that he wishes his family could share that experience with him. And I don't know about you, but that reads pretty lonely to me. Of course, those are just my thoughts. Would love to hear yours as well. Please drop them in the comments. Like this video if you've watched this far and haven't done so yet. Share this if you want. Support me on Patreon if you can. And until tomorrow's video, do remember, obsessing over the things you love, perfectly valid coping mechanism.